Welcome to the Science of Advertising, Episode 4, the show where we review the latest ads and the science behind why they influence and persuade human behaviour. On today's panel, we've got Dr. Jared Cooney-Horvath, the preeminent expert in the field of educational neuroscience, with a focus on learning, memory and attention, and your host, Jonathan Rowley. Today we have 3 new ads that have been released in the last little while, and as you can see, we are shooting remotely. I am up in Byron, Jared is his home, and we can't be in the studio because we have nearly stage 4 lockdowns in Melbourne, so we have gone remote. But first up today, we have an ad from Pornhub, which we will dig into. So interesting to see a pornographic site release some content or an ad during these times. And let's go to it now, Jake. Let's cut to Pornhub's latest creative.
Open to slide 3 from the
So
PDF
now,
I sent you this
can I
morning.
actually hop off this call since I'm not on this account?
It's no problem.
Okay,
Go
cool.
ahead, Sean.
Sure. Let's just start off with January 2020. Now, consumer spending is up. If you look at the graph right below.
What page are we on?
I'm sorry, we're on page 12, the second graph from the top.
Okay.
Danielle, turn your camera off.
All right. So if you look, we're 0.15% higher than 2019. We started this quarter off at 2.75%.
Holy shit.
Daniel.
God.
I don't think he's
Daniel.
January.
Oh
Can you
my
type for us?
Daniel.
Someone
Daniel.
Call Mika.
Oh my God.
You call Daniel on his cell. Call Daniel on his cell. How do we turn this feed off?
Wow.
We can't.
Oh, hell no.
Daniel. Oh my God. Daniel is the host. Holy shit.
Recording.
Oh my God. Oh,
Yes.
Daniel.
no, this is too much. Oh my God.
Great. This is great.
So there we have it, the latest from Pornhub. When I saw this come across my screen and I saw latest creative from Pornhub, for me, it had me fascinated. I was like, what have they done? What is this going to be? I was super intrigued. I opened it up and I watched it and it had me enthralled from day dot. I was there, it had me. And the interesting thing about it, there's a lot of prediction break in this story, a really powerful combination. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, where is this going to go? And then as it continues, I'm like, surely not. Is this what's going to happen? And right now, with so many business meetings via Zoom, Skype, and everything else in between, this is really contextual, really relevant, and highly entertaining. As I dug into it, it got even more fascinating because it was released on International Masturbation Day. How to wank from home safely.
Which is a real thing? I thought that was a joke that they threw in at the end. That's a thing?
It's a real thing. No, it's an absolute joke. So they've tried to create this day again.
Oh, okay.
Had you for a second. But accidental video calls, it had me smiling throughout the entire creative. But one of the most genius things they did here was not only did they create a highly entertaining and a very clever ad that cost them little to next to nothing, but they managed to link the brand all the way through. So as the story had finished, they still had the narrative and the audio running as they seeded in the text that was coming up on screen and the Pornhub logo. So for me, this has full votes, especially right now. Highly entertaining, an ad that you can share around, send to your friends, get a giggle, but an absolute cracking piece of creative. Dr. Jared, what were your thoughts?
Totally agree. This couldn't have been done by any other company, I feel other than Pornhub, because that is when you think of computerized porn, that's the first name that comes to mind. It's funny when you said it, when the new creative from Pornhub came across my desktop and I clicked it immediately. This wasn't what I was expecting, but there you go. But what I liked about it is, it's contextual for them. Like you couldn't have done this with an external magazine or videos. This only works because it's an online setting. They've then done a really sick memory hijack where, because we've done nothing but Zoom for 2 months, everyone is so used to that stupid screen that once it starts going, you start thinking to yourself, kind of like when you're a kid in school and you're like, what's the worst thing that could happen? What if I showed up to school naked? Oh, so you start to think, what's the worst thing that could ever happen on Zoom? And this has got to be one of them. And they just push it through. So they've taken all these memories that you already have for Zoom, and now they've guaranteed that every time you log on to Zoom past this, what's the first thing you're going to think about? Do not masturbate on this camera. So they know we're going to be on Zoom 5-6 times a day every week for the next 2 months. So it's like this repetitive, they found the right memory to tap into. They tied their brain right to it. And now they get free advertising in my head every time I sit down on my computer. It was such a smart move. Loved it.
Yeah, interesting. Like, I was thinking about this just before we jumped on, and it was around comedy and looking at the structure of comedy. And there's two principles there that bounce off. So one is the art of telling a great story, but then you've got prediction break. Like, and it's this beautiful combination between both that brings around humor. But Jared, from your perspective, just digging into what that looks like from learning neuroscience perspective. Yeah. Could you just dig into prediction break and what that really is and how it's so powerful?
So what tends to happen is, so you can assume everyone lives in a prediction of reality. So the way the brain works is you've got kind of two modes. You've got what we'll call kind of active live thinking mode. Then you've got passive prediction mode, where you just use your experiences from the last 30 years of your life, 40 years of your life, to say, I know how this works, boom, I'm going to live there. Now, the vast majority of the time, I'm talking 90 to 95% of the day, you're just sitting in prediction mode. You do not live in reality. You live in your story of reality. As soon as you see a computer, you just start running simulations. Oh, I've seen computers before. You live up here. Anytime a prediction fails, your brain kicks into that active mode, because it's a safety mechanism. If you think about it, if you have a prediction for how an animal should act, and then the animal starts snarling and it breaks your prediction, your brain doesn't know any better. It says, oh, you could be dead right now. Update your story immediately. It kicks you into active gear, and all the machinery goes live to say, change your thinking, change your story, change your prediction about the world. So you can see historically, it makes perfect sense. Dangerous situations kick off your coder. We don't have saber-toothed tigers or anything like that running around anymore, but we still have this same mechanism, and it kicks off anytime our predictions fail. So in this case, I'm looking at a Zoom meeting. I've seen these 100 times. I know exactly what's going to happen. Someone's going to interrupt somebody. Someone's going to talk about a PowerPoint, this. And as soon as you see some dude starting to pull out tissues and a little squeeze bottle of lotion, boom, you haven't seen it before. It's a fear. You go, uh-oh, this isn't what's supposed to be happening. Your brain automatically kicks into active mode. And in this moment, you're going to start learning, remembering, memorizing whatever is coming in. It's your body saying, uh-oh, something unexpected is happening. You better remember it. So bring that back to humor. Humor almost exclusively works off prediction break. Take someone down a path and make them feel calm, make them feel safe, switching on them. It wakes them up. And a lot of the times that laugh comes from the discomfort of being switched into the mode of, uh-oh, the world doesn't make sense anymore. So the best jokes do exactly what you said. They break your prediction, but they don't do it in a way that's scary. They do it in a way that's relatable enough and enough of a parody on your actual life that you can kind of make fun of it. At the end of the day, pretty much all humor is slightly cynical. It has to make you go, oh yeah, that sucks. That's something about me or about the world that's kind of crazy. And in this case, if you've never masturbated before, or you've never seen Pornhub, or you're my 90-year-old grandmother, that prediction break, would probably never happen because she doesn't even have a prediction of Skype. She wouldn't know what the heck is going on. But when somebody starts masturbating, that wouldn't be cynical to them. That wouldn't be funny to them. That would be off-putting. That would be too much. That's not part of her worldview. Yeah. But if you're our age and you grew up with computers and stuff, that's something we've done. That's probably something we've thought about. It's something we're kind of awkward over. So as soon as we get the prediction break, we're live, we see it happening. We go, yep, that's cynical. That's something that could have happened at one point in my life. We recognize it, and that leads us to laugh about it. And off you go. So this perfect mix of prediction break with enough recognizability to make yourself feel, oh, yep, taking the piss on myself. I'm good to go. That's the best comedy there is.
Yeah, totally agree. Round of applause, Pornhub. Well executed. Now we'll transition slightly. So going from a very male-skewed creative or something that really resonates with the male gender, we're moving and transitioning and stepping and changing gears to body form. And this creative has just been released. And let's cut to it now. So there we are. That's the latest from Bodyform. Jared, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on what this meant to you and what they were looking to achieve.
So from a completely personal and let's say artistic standpoint, I absolutely love this. I think there's been a lot of, and wouldn't have thought about this. I got married about 10 years ago. Geez. And before that, I wouldn't have thought about any of these issues of what it means to be a female, the female body. It's just kind of like the joke. You're a man, they're a woman, blood is gross, ooh. But now living with a woman for 10 years, you start to really recognize how powerful these stories are and how much we vilify the female body. So from a personal standpoint, I love what they were doing. The ability to talk about what is still considered a taboo topic in a lot of circles, but use a different way to approach it. So you're kind of simulating it. You're not talking directly about it. You're using animations. You're using pure emotions without ever having to show anything. Very smart move to start to get people to open up about these ideas. And the water birth moment was also, I know it's a small moment in there, but such a huge thing because in the US right now, there's a huge debate between hospital births and home births, where historically births were not something you do. A hospital is something for sickness and birth is not sickness. So that was always something that was historically done at home with midwives. And it's only recently, and say the last 100 years, that we started to really pull that into the medical model. So seeing that live, I know that's going to cause a lot of stir in the US, the home birth versus hospital birth. With all that said, as much as I love this, I have no clue beyond helping people just open up a conversation. Anything, I have no clue what they were trying to do. If this is a business, if this is a blog, if this is so that's, as a piece of art, love it. And it's going to stick with me and I'm going to share it with my wife and we'll talk about it. It'll be awesome. But as a piece of advertising, I don't even know if it was meant to be. I mean, do you have any idea what the business is or what they're doing?
Yeah, so Bodyform, very large in the UK or larger in the UK. That's the foundation of their business, and it's sanitary items for women. So it's really fun to talk to, and that was it's interesting not having any experience with the brand, whereas being somewhat familiar with the brand. And I had a similar thought, but right from the get-go, this had my attention. It was speaking directly to the target audience and it pulled them straight in. Even though I am not directly part of the target audience, it had me. I was enthralled. I was engaged. And the music track was absolutely brilliant. Yeah. I'm not sure if you got the words right at the start, but it was I Know You. And I dug into the song, and it's a song called Priestess, and it really celebrates all things women. And it's I Know You, and that really flowed through. So from the get-go, that you can see that was the intent. It was human. It was relatable. It leverages both like real world footage and animation to help tell this story. And it also had several storylines going on, and you could pick up on those themes. But the most genius thing, there was no voice. There was no actual voiceover articulating. It was just using music. It was just using animation and sound effects to deliver these stories in a really powerful way that, in my opinion, a voiceover could never have done. So, yeah, these stories were anything from being pregnant to finding out that you couldn't carry a child, through to menopause, really powerful scenes that could relate anywhere from teenagers all the way through to, females in their 40s, 50s, 60s. So incredibly relatable and genius in its way. So when it comes to sanitary items, there's two real strategies. You've got one that is very brand orientated. How do I connect with my audience in such a way that they'll fall in love with me, that we know them better than anyone else? Or you go the other path, which is we've got a new innovation. It's a new technology. It's, so it's either product development or it's brand.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting that I'm wondering how much, I'm kind of thinking this back now to the Pornhub one as well. How much original brand recognition does matter in these instances? So if you didn't know what the hell Pornhub was and you saw that, you might think of masturbation, but you might not think of Pornhub. You would think of Porn X or something else that you get, Playboy, wherever the heck else you get your porn. But because we know that, it was easy for me to slot right in. With this one, if you know it, I'm sure from the, like you were just saying, from the get-go, you know what they're doing. So you can kind of draw that line between this ad and that product. But for someone like me who didn't know anything, I wonder where that line is going to be drawn. For me, it was nowhere. It was just, this is a beautiful piece of art. but it wasn't linked to a product. But I wonder if other people will see it and link it to other forms of that product and say, well, cool, Tampax, or if they didn't know any better. Like how important is that initial brand recognition to the ad being forced to give you more information or being allowed to take a lot of information out?
Look, a great point. So as you look at it, anyone that was familiar with either Pornhub or Bodyform, they would then really resonate with it. Like it would, the relationship you have with that particular brand just goes to another level of depth, to the point where you'd share it with your friends and family. You'd nearly become an ambassador of it. So it's nearly got this viral or social element that you'd seed it to your peers. Yeah. And that is incredibly powerful. And if that's what transpires, and I had a quick look, and if we have a quick look now, we'll pull it up on screen. If you look at just some trended traffic for this particular brand when this dropped, it's the peak in the last 5 years. So it's obviously connected with the audience and they've shared it with their peers, and it's something that they've really related to and connected to. But it gets deeper and more clever than that. The hashtag at the end was womb stories. So they've been running these womb stories for quite some time and getting stories from their supporter base, you know, their fans, these people that really love the brand. And this is everywhere from, you know, young girls, 10, 11, 12, sharing their first period, all the way through to menopausal women. But you can obviously see that this creative was skewed to the younger demographic. It moves fast, the animation, everything really speaks to, you know, that younger cohort. But they've leveraged these real world stories to create this piece. So they're leveraging their customer base to tell their stories and help tell these stories that, so it's a really clever piece. But to your point, if you weren't familiar with the brand at all and you saw it once, you'd love it as a piece of art, but you may not necessarily understand what the product is, who it's for. But if you had any affinity or you had some awareness, you'd build a really strong relationship with it.
What's interesting is now that you've told me what it's for, I'd be interested to go look that up to see, okay, that sounds like something my wife would like to support and be a part of, but I didn't know. So it makes you question when you're just starting out versus deep into the game of being a brand, a market of advertising, how you have to change and move with your recognition. It's necessarily going to the kind of things you can do being around for 20 years can be very different than the kind of things you can do it for 2 years. And then knowing your market too. I'm sure if they're big in the UK, everyone knows them there. So they see it and they go, boom, already know what's going on. And maybe it's not even available in Australia. So to us, it's just an interesting thing. You know what I love too? Draw this back to, we haven't gone to it yet, but we'll get to it in a second. The ad we've selected for the throwback ad this week, hold on to that because something very interesting happens in that ad that I want to compare to this ad. So, but at this point right now, I want to say that this ad tapped into the current zeitgeist perfectly. We're at a point in a lot of the world globally where female rights and empowerment are stepping up, and women are getting sick and tired of being pandered to and pretended like everything is cute. Like I remember it was about a year ago, all the old period ads used to just use blue liquid and poured it on a pad to show how absorbent it was. And it was about a year ago, an ad came out and used red liquid and said, it's blood. Why do we have to pretend it's anything else? Like this, half of the world goes through this. Let's stop catering to the male audience and just make it realistic. And that was a huge wake up call. And a lot of people gravitated towards that because that's what women are trying to say. They're like, look, we exist. We're real. We don't have to lie about how prevalent miscarriages are, how menopause hits all of us, how we go barren, how some of us need to take shots to have babies. Like this is real stuff that not one person's having, millions are. So this tapped right into that and is going to move that movement forward. So they've kind of fit right into this perfect cultural moment where they can actually support, which is really cool when you think about it as a movement. You can support change around the world while still doing your job of advertising and then move things forward while still getting your brand out there, which I think is just a really cool, but it's dangerous. When we get to the throwback episode, we'll come back to this point and we'll see how things can change over time.
But at its essence, it's storytelling. So back to womb stories, it's telling stories. And you can see, 5, 10, 20 years ago, everyone that was producing ads for tampons, they were probably male or had some sort of male influence, because it was literally cup of water, here it is, problem solved. There it is. But that's your technology more so than the brand. And technology now has probably got to a point where there's not a huge amount of innovation that we can have. There's only so much that you can absorb, and everyone's playing it at a similar field. Yeah. So what can we really do? We can build a really deep and emotional connection to our audience. And this is where this is I feel has gone in a very compelling way. It's telling compelling stories that really connect. And as you start to think about storytelling, what is storytelling? And I remember being in Uluru, and we're sitting at dinner in the night sky, and all we could see was the stars. And we had people telling us stories about the Indigenous people of this country. And their stories through both song and dance was the way they used to navigate around the land and the country. So as you see them sing and dance, this is the way of actually embedding the memory. So when they navigate from one side to the other, they know the path, they know the dangers and what to look out for and the milestones. And I just can't stop thinking about the power of telling a compelling story. And through this, you can see the visuals of the woman that's just found out that she will not be able to carry a baby. Literally the lights go off and it's this desolate landscape, inside the garden that was supposed to be there that was once fertile, but the power of storytelling. So in terms of your view, Jared, why is story so powerful for humans?
So the brain works in pure narrative. I'm not being metaphorical when I say that the brain works in story. So when you break a story down, there's really only 3 essential ingredients you need for something to be a narrative. It's a cause and effect chain. So we call that the physical thrust. Events have to happen in an order that you see this one caused this one to happen. This one was precipitated by this. At the same time, then you need what's called the psychological thrust. Characters or the audience have to feel a certain way as these events are occurring. So it can't just be a flat thing. You have to feel good, feel bad with these cause and effect moments. And then the third thing is you need an audience. A story without a person is nothing. A story in my head is not yet a story until I share it with you and you give me some feedback about it. That is when you look at how the brain actually organizes the world. That's its normal pattern. Cause and effect, emotional valence, socialization. So just think about when you dream. When you dream, it's a mishmash of events. Like when you wake up and you try and tell someone a dream, you always have to bail out because it sounds so stupid when you're awake. You're like, yeah, I was on a horse and then I was in an office and then I was taking a test. I'm sorry, this is horrible. When you're awake, you recognize it doesn't make any sense, but when you're asleep and in the dream, it makes perfect sense because that's your brain drawing a cause and effect chain. Yes, of course you're in an office after riding a horse. And then after an office, you have to take a test. That's the way the world works. No, it's not. That's your brain building a cause and effect chain, assigning emotions to each of these moments, and that's your narrative. So whenever you get a good story, a good narrative, you're literally just riding the rails that already exist in the brain. That's the way the brain wants to work. You're just saying, sweet, let me pop my train ride on and let's go. You're not fighting against anything. You're going with the flow. Now, the interesting thing about narrative too is I think you just nailed it, is it comes in a myriad of forms. In the Western world, we tend to favor words. We write and we talk. We literally narrate our stories, but they don't have to be. Cause and effect, emotional valence can be demonstrated through dance, through music, through all these other realms. So I remember when I was going, my original degree, I went to film school back in another life. And the very first film class you get to take where you make movies, you're not allowed to use any dialogue. You can't use any narration. You can only use images, the film, and sound, music. And everyone hated it. Oh gosh, we couldn't stand it. But by the end of it, you recognize why, because the teachers flat out say, if you can tell a story visually without words, then the words become icing on your cake. But this medium that we're using here, film, is a visual medium. Learn how to use it. And like you said, this ad did that perfectly. It shows you don't need to tell a story. You can live a story. You can enact a story. And the less you tell it to me, the more you let me experience it, the more I start to mentally simulate it up here. I'm part of your story, and now I'm in. It's not just your story, it's our story. And off we go. That's the socialization aspect of the storytelling. And it works so much better with visuals than it does with auditory, just text. So I think this is my old film professors would have loved this. They just said, that's what we're going for. You can tell the deepest story without ever saying a word, because storytelling isn't an oral thing. It can be, but it's everything else. So use your medium to the best of your abilities.
Yeah. In terms of memory and story, is the most vital elements, is it looking at the emotion that you're like, I'm just curious from your experience, when you are telling a story, what parts do you recall? How do you really embed memory?
It has to be, so believe it or not, it has to be both. So you've seen those ads where like the dogs are all getting beat up and then it shows a whale and the whale's crying and you get really deep emotions from those ads, but you don't really remember much about them other than, damn, that was sad. And then you've had unemotional narratives where it's just a cause and effect chain of events where things happen. Like I'm thinking this is going to suck, but there was a movie a couple of years ago that won Best Picture called 12 Years a Slave, which was 2 hours of pure depression. Cause and effect, there was a cause and effect narrative, but the emotion was nothing but sadness and depression. So most people remember very little about that movie. So it's the combination of the two. Once you get emotional swings, and it can't just be an emotion, it has to be emotional movement with cause and effect, that's where you get your memory boost. Any one in isolation doesn't really do much for memory. It's a combination of the two that allows you to form a chain that, for whatever reason, that's our brain's natural pattern where it goes, a narrative, store that in my schema, off we go. So that way, just anytime you come across patterns like that in the future, you can tap into that narrative, remember the whole narrative, and that helps you make sense of future patterns. So it turns out it's not just the pure emotion and it's not just the pure cause and effect physical movement. It's the combination of the two that seems to matter.
So it's sort of pleasure, pain. You've got to elicit some sadness, but then you've also got to inject some happiness and elation in there.
And you can still do that. I mean, I could sit you in the lab and just show you happy pictures and then sad pictures and then angry pictures, but you're still not going to remember much of those pictures until I link them into a cause and effect chain. Because this, then this. And then vice versa. If I just give you events without any emotions, most people never remember those events. That's most of school. You get events without emotions. It goes in for about a week and then it's gone. So it's a combination of the two that, and again, I'd love to say that I can tell you the exact chemical cascade, but we don't know. It just seems like that is the base pattern of the brain. So when you tap into that natural working pattern, boom, the brain's like, yep, that's what I do. And it just gets right in there.
Yeah. So you got a narrative, you got a storyline, and then as you're going through the storyline, you're just sort of fluctuating between the peaks and the troughs.
Boom.
And you need both of those. If you're just constant high or you're constant low,
it's nothingness. That's why a lot of comedy films, if you think about it, a lot of comedy films are fun when you're watching them, but you don't remember much because if they're just pure comedy the whole time, it's like, okay, cool. And it just seems to go away. But those comedy films, which kind of bring you down and then back up and they become real, and you're like, wow, that one really kind of hit the heart and made me cry. You tend to remember those more. Like I think my favorite comedy of all time is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Back in the day. And at the end, you're actually crying at that movie. And you're like, that's why you remember it so well. It's because it wasn't just 2 hours of joy or 2 hours of sadness. It was a movement. And once you make that switch, that move between emotions, that's when you really start to get these boosts.
Interesting. And just like great love movies or movies about love or, which is one of my wife's favorite genres. We even just watched Slumdog Millionaire, which was interesting again because I haven't seen it in many years. But yeah, there's a lot of really heartfelt moments in there where you just can't even believe that this happens on our planet. And then you've got these really nice, beautiful pieces of, children and kids coming together and lovely stories within it. But, love stories seem to have this pain, but then there's this love or this intrigue as well. So it keeps you on the edge of your seat. But yeah, interesting in terms of
they say who is Kurt Vonnegut. He spent a huge chunk of his career just coming up with story movements, like trying to find the archetypes of stories. And he said the one story that once you write it, you're going to get $1 million every day of the week is the story that starts with your lead character in a downtrodden spot. Like let's just take Cinderella, sad, out of my luck, nothing's going to happen. Then throughout the story, things get better and better and the emotions start to get better. And I got a date and I got some friends and shit's going good. And then right at the peak, you take them all the way down to worse than they were before. I lose my slippers. Everyone's beating me again. My life is right back to normal. And then you flip it and bring it higher than it was before. So it's this kind of slow build, quick release, back up to the top. And that really quick movement at the end seems to be the one that we love the most. And he wasn't joking. He's like, man, every movie that has that ends up being a really popular movie because that just seems to be the one flow that just taps into our emotions perfectly. It's like, yeah, that's it. The underdog. Oh, yay. Type of story.
Look at the film. Look at the film guy. He's here.
I know I'm bringing all my old school stuff. I should bring my brain stuff, and now I'm bringing my narrative stuff today.
I love it. But yeah, both of these had like a correlation between stories. So I just want to spend a bit of time and get your thoughts on it. And that's been amazing. But Tango Energy, this is the one, this is an interesting one because it's a brand that hasn't been on TV. It hasn't been had a big above the line campaign or really much attention at all. Yeah. So this is the first step for them. And interesting time to go live because it was in the middle of COVID. They had to shoot this during lockdown, so their hands were tied in many different ways. But we'll cut to it now. Here's the latest from Tango Energy.
Just tell us what you want.
No more confusing offers!
Okay.
Just low prices!
Okay.
And energy with a clean conscience.
It's okay. Sure. Not a problem.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Take charge and switch to Tango Energy today.
So there we have it, Tango Energy, shot on what was a relatively shoestring budget, and you can see social distancing was in place, and all things considered, they've done a reasonable job with the cards that were dealt. You know, shooting their first TVC during a pandemic, not an easy situation for any brand. Interestingly enough, electricity brands, what is an incredibly commoditized industry, it's electricity. How do you differentiate yourself? Which has led to this one. You can see they've started at the end and they've tried to build their creative and tight Tango theme. So, you know, you can see the subtle tangled colors throughout, which might be the megaphone. You can see the orange lamp in the lounge room, even the lights on the mock police car. So they've tried to connect the Tango branding throughout, but it's very subtle and it's very weak. This ad does get your attention. You know, anything with lights and sirens typically does have that effect on us. It usually signals emergency, so we do tend to pay attention. And literally just from the outset, it was lights and sirens. It had a subtle use of a trusted advisor. So that was a lady with the microphone. So she does present reasonably well. She's happy and communicates service. So great call in casting. I think she was a good actress for the role. But I'm really curious where they're going to take it from here. They're going to pivot and take it in a very different direction. It's hard to really build on this idea and style. Like, what can you really do with it? And it's very unmemorable from many different respects. Like, it could have really been any brand. Like, you could have slapped an AGL. You could have slapped an Energy Australia on the back of this ad, and it really could have been anyone. So how do you position in a really cluttered market? You know, I probably would have liked to have seen a longer version of this, maybe even a 45 or a 60. So something that gets your attention, holds it, and has a really simple proposition. But I'd want what you'd call like a reason to believe, an RTB or some sort of proof point. Justify why you've got cheaper rates. Like, tell me a little bit more about who you are and why I believe. And I know the objective of this is just to get attention and a little bit of interest. Hopefully then they go to the website, which I believe it will do. It will get some traction. But the motivating driving force to get someone to go all the way through to become a Tango customer, there's some weak linkages there. So in terms of conversion, this could be a real challenge for them. So they may get some interest and they may get some attention, but it'll be short-lived while the ad is running. But post any ad spend, no one's going to recall this ad or Tango for that matter. So yeah, I'm really curious to see where they take it from here. But Jared, what were you thinking as you're watching this piece of creative?
Yeah, I'm with you. This was a very safe bet for them. It feels like a commercial I've seen 100 times, or at least a scenario I've seen 100 times. And it took me a second to recognize that I really didn't like it. Because I think I got it. Okay, it's going to be easier. It's going to be cheaper. And I think they're more economical, more environmental, excuse me. But that's kind of where I wish you would put your focus. What differentiates you? I'm guessing. And see, the fact that I even have to guess is probably the sign that something wasn't nailed in this one. I'm guessing that they're an environmental, that they're a more green energy. which is lovely to tap into. That's a really good time to start hitting that market to say, we're an energy company that's giving back to the environment. Cool. Then freaking tell me that. Don't make me guess that and laugh my way through something and be like, that's giggly, that's cute. And then just have a little leaf in your logo and assume I'm going to make the connection deep enough. So when I came back to it, I realized, it's smooth. Like you said, I didn't know it was done during COVID, but it's well produced for what it is. It just feels like someone playing a really safe, out of the box game. And I'd much rather be like, tell me why you're important. Bring me a little bit more. Even if at the end they would have just spent that 5 seconds at the end to say, no locking contract fee, no this, the first green energy company in Australia giving back to the environment. Boom. Like, even just give me 5 seconds where you just tell me, stop the joke, stop the comedy, tell me what the hell is going on, and off we go. Because you got my attention now. What are you going to do with it? All you're going to do is show me a logo? Okay. I think I get what they were trying to do with it. They never tied it enough to their brand to make it stick out and make me go, okay, I understand you now more than anyone else.
Yeah. Just picking up what you said there with green energy, it's a commodity. So any commodity price is an absolute must. You've got to be playing at a really competitive rate. So it's a given. Do you really want to just play on cheap? Not necessarily. But I think it was an episode a couple ago, we were talking about pizza and then pizza delivery. So in that example, we're talking about pizza. Who owns that? It's Pizza Hut. When you say pizza, you think of Pizza Hut. And then when you say pizza delivery, what do you think of?
Go to Domino's.
It's Domino's, which, right now, pizza delivery is far bigger category than what pizza is. Yeah. So they've really owned it. And this is just coming through now in terms of energy. Who owns energy? When you think of energy, what brand do you think of? It's usually kind of the big three. So it's Energy Australia, AGL, and Origin. They're the dominant beasts. So for these type of brands, they're going to have to own, 2 words, not necessarily just one. So what are those 2 words really going to be? And there's Australian Energy, and interestingly enough, this company is Chinese owned, which they've had a little bit of backlash online about.
Yeah.
Especially right now with what's going on with the geopolitical tension. There is a little bit of backlash around that. But Australian Energy, Red Energy is doing a really good job around owning that as a term. Green energy, which you just mentioned there, absolutely growing category. But I'd argue PowerShop is probably doing the best in that particular category, trying to own it. The other one's renewable. And with Tango, I did do a little bit of digging. And they're actually the retail arm for Pacific Hydro. So Pacific Hydro, I've got a range of wind farms and I've also got a range of hydro plants as well. So they're very big on renewable.
Yeah.
So this becomes really interesting. So who really owns renewable? Like Momentum probably arguably do now because they're owned by Hydro Tasmania. But if you start telling this story that, we're the retail arm of Pacific Hydro, the more you partner with us, the more projects we can actually fund and become more and more renewable. I think there's a nice link there. But I
think you've nailed it. It's got to be the second word. You're in the energy field, cool. The energy field is sapped. You're not going to beat, if you're in the burger world, you're not going to beat McDonald's. So if you said environmental energy and your logo had the leaf, but then you had the solar farm or the wind turret somewhere, if that's your thing, let that be your thing. Let that sing. What does that have to do with a cop in a standoff situation? I mean, what was this? Was this guy killing somebody or did he hold someone hostage? Like, I'm very confused as to, I wish they would have tied it into that. The environmental, who was I holding hostage? The environment. Why? Because my energy is just pumping out gas. Well, we can release you. Tie it in there. If that's your thing, own that. What's your second word? I like that idea.
Yeah, but just going back, it is a commodity. You do need to be very efficient. People are looking for cheap rates, but it's a very confusing market. No one really knows, this is where comparison, who's good, who's not. I don't really know. What's my customer service? Arguable. But it's from a brand perspective, what are the 1 or 2 words you were going to own? And this is the opportunity for Tango or any energy company out there that's trying to take some market share. Yeah. Let's look at a category that's going to be growing, which I'd say Australian energy, yes. Green energy, yes. And renewable, absolutely. What does that look like? Renewable en masse. So that is hydro, it is wind farms. But I'd also say and argue that it's renewable from home. So there's a potential play for them that anyone that has solar panels or creating their own renewable energy, how do you become the preferred energy company for these particular households? Like the opportunity is absolutely there. It's just how do you position, but then own it rather than dancing around and being a little bit entertaining, getting some attention and a little bit of interest and hoping that'll flow through your funnel. For short term, yes, you'll get some ROI. Long term, as soon as you stop spending on this, you're gone. It's like a little bit of a peak, but you're back to your baseline. Yeah. So, yeah, again, an interesting one with Tango.
And you're right. If you think about that trusted advisor, there's nowhere to go for her. What are they going to do? This ad again with a different guy saying, what are your demands? And then a third ad where there's another hostage situation. What are your demands? It's like, unless that cop would have done something more and turned to the camera and helped out some kids, and it's going to be a real tricky. You're right. It was a good out of the gate, but it's going to be gone. Sad. But.
And that's on your long-term branded assets. What are you going to continually invest in? You know, compare the markets. They've invested in the meerkats forever and a day. Yeah. Like you need something that you're going to continue to build and leverage. Yeah, and it was just,
you know, what took time. I've been paying attention to. It's always been around, and to be frank, I still don't get it. But what is that one brand that does the ads where it's like paranormal stuff is happening? Quote Direct or some stuff?
Oh, Budget Direct.
Budget Direct. It is the weirdest. I think it shows two things. One, it shows if you do anything long enough, people will eventually start to recognize it. And so that was one of, like, I've been seeing that for about 2 years. And only recently I've been like, damn, they keep showing these paranormal things. I don't get it. I don't get why, but at least now I've seen it enough that I'm like, okay, you're the paranormal. There's a dragon this episode. Whoop-de-doo. So I don't get it, but at least it shows that if you do something long enough, you can get it to stick out.
Do you know the creative that was before that?
For Budget Direct?
Yeah.
I'm seeing a purple screen in my head. That's it.
So they had a character called Captain Risky.
Oh, the dude on the motorcycle who'd go through the house on, yeah.
So
what happened to him?
So they killed him off.
Why?
So interesting because he became quite a character, and it could have been a change of CMO, changing creative agency. They just didn't want to continue with Captain Risky, but he was brilliant. I loved him because he got attention. He was relatable, but in essence, he told the story that we don't want to insure risky people because that's how we keep our premiums low. Like There's a really simple story narrative that sits below it and very easy to correlate. But yeah, I had a lot of time for Captain Risky. I thought he was great. I was a little bit disappointed when they killed him off and they moved to this, paranormal, what's going on.
Yeah, X-Files type. But they haven't locked down the two characters well enough on the paranormal. Like I recognize the guy kind of, but you have to make it clear. Captain Risky comes out and says his name every freaking time before he goes flying through a wall. These two, it's like some days you see the girl, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you see the guy, sometimes you don't. It's too all over the shop. But at least, I guess the point I was trying to make is I started to recognize it, but it's taken years. So I guess you could pick this woman, this cop, to be your trusted advisor. It might take a couple of years to get there. Or you just start with something out of the gate that people are like, okay, cool. You've opened up enough of a window. Stuntman, I can do anything I want. I'll shoot him out of a cannon. I'll jump him off of a cliff. Who cares? You've opened up enough of a window that you can keep this thing going as long as you need to.
That's why I reckon this is a real short-term play. It's like, let's have a crack. Let's see what we can get. The long-term branded assets hasn't really been considered. Yeah. All they're looking at is Take Charge Tango, which isn't that sticky anyway, and doesn't really tell their story because Take Charge, there's a nice little play on energy, but it doesn't really mean anything. So, yeah, I think from a long-term branded assets and where they take it from here, I'm very curious to see where Tango take this creative and what they're going to invest in from a brand perspective. What are they going to stand for, and what's the one or two words they're going to own in consumers' minds? But that's it from Tango. Now we'll jump to our classic creatives, which we have from several years ago. I think it was over 10 years ago now. This ad from Pure Blonde. There we have it. Pure Blonde, one of our classic creatives. Jared, you mentioned you wanted to come back and revisit this one, especially after looking at the latest from Pornhub and what we've got from Bodyform. So where did you want to take this?
Okay. This shows how the cultural zeitgeist changes. And sometimes it changes right out of your dimension. And what was once relevant is now so irrelevant that you've just got to say, well, that was a moment in time that made sense. So here we've got, I totally get what they're doing. And I kind of oddly love what they're doing. So you've got a beer company that has to A, differentiate its beer in some way, but B, recognize that most of its clientele are Aussie blokes. So what do? You make the beer look beautiful, and then you bring the Aussie bloke in to be like, yeah, screw you all. So now what I've done is I've given you something nice to show you how I'm different, but I've shown you that I know who my customer is, so come in and do your thing. 10 years ago, that Aussie bloke coming in with that van was most definitely the customer of Pure Blonde. Today, outside of maybe some outskirt towns, I don't think any Aussie bloke wants to be seen as that type of person, especially as the environmental stuff changes. You don't want to be the guy to be like, cool, when I drink beer, I destroy perfection. You don't want to be the guy who goes, yeah, as an Aussie bloke, what do? I drink all the time and throw birds through the air. I'm just one of those Aussie blokes. It's kind of like that masculinity that was really prevalent 10, 15 years ago is slowly starting to turn down. And now the younger drinking market, the people who will be buying beer, don't want to be seen as that. They don't want to be characterized as that kind of Aussie bloke. They want to be a different type of man. So this ad would have hit perfectly 10 years ago. But I think you play that ad now, you're going to get more lashback because the world has changed enough to make you go, oh, no, that's not cool. Like, it's funny, it's cute. I actually really appreciate it and enjoy it. And if they would have just stuck with the clean, I think they can bring back the total Pure Blonde clean environment. I think that was good. I'm like, oh man, that's what I want to drink. That should be the energy ad, showing me some leaves, showing me some water trickling, and then being in that makes me think clean. Yeah, I'm in. Stick with that. That's fine. But I don't think you can bring in I'm going to destroy the environment now and tear up weeds and kill birds. I don't think people are going to resonate with that one too much anymore. So loved it for the time, but you see, once the zeitgeist changes, once the culture changes, some things change with it, some things don't.
Very, very interesting. Totally agree. When you look at the brand, this is Pure Blonde. So that is the brand name. So it played on all things pure.
Yeah. And
as you're drinking a beer, you want... Oddly enough, it was nearly like as you were drinking a beer, you'd nearly feel like you're drinking something healthy, not knowing that, beer and alcohol is a toxin, but it would feel fresh. Those memories would just come flooding back. Like, unlike the Tango ad we just saw that literally just had a brand slapped at the end and it could have been any brand. Yeah. There is no other beer brand that could have had Pure Blonde, so it had this pure with baby animals, frolicking through the grass, through, to these nearly beautiful Swedish blonde-haired, in white, nearly angelic characters, in an oasis. They were like pure blonde. You couldn't have created that world any more perfectly than what they did. And then really relatable for the Aussie character to come in, grab a bird beak, open a beer can with a bird beak, and then just throw the pigeon away. So, a great ad, really resonated with the market at the time where beer was so saturated. How do you differentiate yourself? Cool, let's create a really fresh, crisp, that type of image that they have done. So there was a reason this really boosted this brand to be a juggernaut that it once was. But to your point, the market share of Pure Blonde compared to what it once was, it's a shell of the brand it had. So it goes back to the market shifts and you've got to change your image with the times. Otherwise you do become, a legacy brand. And VB's got the same challenge now. It's a very masculine, manly brand. Always has been. It's probably an ad that should be, or several ads we can review at a later time. Why did it connect to that masculinity and that identity of what an Australian really is? Whereas right now, what are the beer brands that are really flying? I know you're a craft beer enthusiast.
But you think of it, if you think about the masculine brand, Great Northern has kind of tapped into the new masculine brand for Australia, where it's not trashy Australian bloke. It's we go into rivers, we hike, we go make fires and stuff. Like it's masculine without being gross, for lack of a better word. And I think VB got stuck in that where so long as the cricket's on, you'll see VB, but they're tied to nothing else because they can't be that old school masculine. The young beer drinkers don't care about that anymore. They don't want it anymore. So that's why I think I think you nailed it. The Pure Blonde, I think, could still bring back that purity aspect. I still love that and think, why not? Comparatively, if you gave me a beer that I thought was healthy, if you could still somehow do that without calling it like low carb or low fat light beer, cool, I'm totally down. Like I want some water. That looked really nice. But as soon as you then juxtapose, and this kind of goes back to the comedy thing at the beginning. What is comedy? Prediction break with relatability enough that it's cynical towards me. 10 years ago, prediction, here's beautiful prediction break. Here comes something totally out of the blue. And it's cynical enough because it's making fun of me as an Aussie bloke, but I really recognize all those behaviors. Yeah, I do that. Yeah, I'm kind of a slob. Yeah, I am. Ha ha ha. That's cute. Now you do the prediction break, but I don't think enough people are going to relate. Some of the old folks still will, but I don't think enough people are going to relate to that break to make it cynical enough. They're just going to say, ooh, I don't want to be that. Ooh, that guy's trash. Forget you. If that guy's drinking Pure Blonde, I don't want to drink Pure Blonde. So it has to be close enough to me, relatable enough that I find my own cynicism and I can laugh with you, as opposed to just go, oh, that guy, trash, man. I don't know. If Pure Blonde drinkers look like that, I'm going back to my craft beers. Forget it.
So you go just to summarize, you go from Pornhub, Bodyform, Pure Blonde. They really understood exactly who they were communicating to, and they were relevant to have this, for some of them cynical, for others just understood what they were going through. Yeah. And they empathized and could relate. Whereas right now, Pure Blonde doesn't have that. So it's nearly repulsion rather than I want to be more like you. I love you. I want you to be a part of my life. Yeah. So yeah, great.
And then that's what the energy company just missed. It had no audience that it was shooting at. Going back to the energy thing is environmental angles. People will pay a premium for the environment. It's the weird, you go to Whole Foods and you'll pay $10 more for vegetables because they're organic. Why? Because the people who are interested in organic and environment are willing to pay more for that. They don't want to. It sucks. I wish I didn't have to pay an extra $2 for a head of lettuce, but I'm willing to do it because I'm trying to do what I can for the environment. So in that case, if the environment is your goal, it's okay. I would almost say pull back the cost and focus on the energy, focus on the environment stuff, because the people who care about that, if that's your audience, they're not the ones looking for a deal. They're the ones looking to help the environment. So, at the end of the day, don't price gouge them. But if that's your audience, shoot towards the right. Who are you talking to? And I don't know who the heck they were talking to with the energy one.
But that also would come down to stickiness. As soon as you're a low cost or it's just on price, as soon as someone else is cheaper, you're moving. It really is that commodity. But you want to build that base of raving fans to the point where, Bodyform, raving fan customers, they will share that ad on their socials and their peers and become that trusted ambassador for that particular brand. Word of mouth marketing is the most powerful form of marketing, bar none. Yeah. So how do you actually get a group of raving fans for an energy company? Very, very challenging, but not out of the it is doable in some form.
And I think you just got to, and this is where you hit that point where you say sometimes a small market share who's really devoted is all you need. I think too often we try and shoot for everything. I remember, this is going to sound bad for me, but the first book I wrote, I made it so general. I'm like, I'm going to make it for everyone. Hey, everyone come in. It's for parents and teachers and kids and this, and you get nothing. But then you make your next book and you make it only for like year 3 teachers of math. And all of a sudden, boom, you get your market. So there's a fear of saying we're shooting for this 10% of people because you think, oh, I'm going to cut off my legs. I'm losing 90%. But no, if you know your customer base, go for it. You can build a huge pool and they're going to be with you the whole step of the way. And that might be more than shooting for everyone, throwing out that wide net and getting absolutely nothing.
I love that point because there was an amazing creative I worked with, and this was early on in my career, and it's always stuck with me. And we're writing a set of radio scripts, And we're looking at who is the audience, like specifically, who is it? I want to know literally to the person. Are they a 33-year-old female? They live in Berwick. They got 2 kids. They're really stressed. They're not in a great relationship. You know, they shop at Coles, like really specific. And he would literally write an ad for that one person. And his theory and belief was that if I write so specifically to this person that will love what I'm writing and I'm solving her problems, the people that are similar to her will tune in and they will listen.
Yeah,
I will communicate to them. But if I'm trying to communicate mass, I'll end up not communicating to anyone.
Yeah.
So it'll just land on no one's ears. So I just want to talk to my cohort, my people. I want to be so relevant that they just can't not hear what I'm saying because I am crafting this message for them specifically. And it's really stuck with me, and creatives like all the way through to this day. I go, who are we talking to? Who is that person? I don't want to know it's for 25 to 54-year-olds that live in Melbourne. Do you know?
Yeah.
I want to know who is this at? What problem are we really solving? Who is this person? I'd rather have 5% of people, you know, that love my brand, and that is my base, and it's so strong that we can build on, rather than trying to be everyone's best friend when it's just never going to happen.
So now I'm thinking, and I'm not a creative man myself, but I'm thinking now, let's go back to the energy ad. Who is the people that you're shooting for? What if you pulled that back and instead of a hostage situation, which still has nothing to do with anything, the more I think about it, the sillier that idea is. What's the one thing that, if you're going for the environmental crowd, what's the one thing they can relate to? It's at 6 p.m. someone's going to knock on your door from an energy company and try and sell you energy. So that becomes your flow, where you've got your one customer and everyone just keeps knocking on his door trying to sell them energy. You feed in your differences there to go, okay, are you environmental? No. Are you environmental? No. Are you environmental? And finally, this last one comes in and you can say, yes, we are. We're highly green energy. We're highly this. This is what we want to do. Please come in. So, I mean, it's just one of the thing where now you've told your audience who it is I'm looking for. I don't care about this. I don't care about this. No one is doing the one thing I want except us. We're the only ones out of these 10 people knocking on your door who are going to answer the question, yes, we are going to give you green energy. Boom. Congratulations. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's not super creative, but do you know, at least then you're saying it's, so if I'm watching this commercial and I don't care about the environment, I'll laugh at it and be like, hey, that's silly. But someone like my wife and me will be like, that's us. Okay, thank you. Let's take a look at this.
But right there, you could have a trusted advisor, which is a customer that's at this house. You know, you create a house in a particular suburb that feels like a suburb that you want your customers to be living in.
Yeah.
You know, is it like a 3-4 bedroom brick veneer in Berwick? You know, let's create that scenario, and that's who we want. Do you know who's at the door? You know, it's a 45-year-old with a couple of kids in the background that's caring about the environment, or, you know, you could start building some characters that are telling your story, and you could create the problem with, you know, dirty, scummy looking sort of door knockers trying to sell energy at lower rates and all the rest of it. And they can just ask a couple of probing questions. But really, and that's where I was nearly thinking as you were talking, energy needs leaders. Like, it really needs a brand and leadership on where we're taking this. What are we trying to do? Yeah. Like, at the moment, the government's really struggling with leading the conversation around energy. You know, they're fumbling their way through it, trying to please the masses and pleasing no one at the same time. Yeah. So there's an opportunity for a brand to go, you know what? We want to be renewable, and we want this country to be renewable. We've got a range of hydro, wind farms. We want to invest more. The only way we can invest more in these projects is by you helping us. Join our cause. Yeah. Like, that's the opportunity to lead, but then you're also bringing your cohort with you, and anyone that's going, you know what? I want to get behind that. I'm there. Do you know? I'm happy to pay, even if there is a 5 or 10% premium. And Tango, I don't think there is. They're really low cost.
Yeah.
But again, you can't choose your energy. The energy just goes into a pool and everyone pulls it. The only thing that can control how many renewable projects are in this country, so that we can pull more renewable energy rather than coal as such. But yeah, I love that, to the point now I really want to go to Tango and just go, hey guys,
we've got a pitch for it. Listen, everyone sit down. All right, picture this. But I love it. Yeah, I think that's funny. And when you think, okay, the guy getting out of the truck in the Pure Blonde ad, probably not going to love that advertisement. Fine. That's not your market. Who are you shooting for? Make it specific.
Yeah. Build that customer of raving fans. And if you go all the way back to Apple, that's all Apple did. Yeah. Apple wanted to own, you know, nerds as such. and they created creative just to speak. And I remember reading about Apple. The ad was only intended to reach about 100,000. They bought mass. It was about 100,000 people they really wanted to reach, which was the highly intelligent, nerdy community that understood what they were trying to do and the play. Yeah. And they became the Raving Fan customer base to build from. So again, know your customer, who is it, own them, and get them behind your cause. But great point. But Dr. Jared, thank you for joining us on episode 4.
4, man, we're getting far. Thank you. Looking forward to episode 5 one of these days.
Love it. Over and out. Goodbye from us.
Toodles.